In this video, you'll learn what are bonds, why do we have negative interest bonds, and how the government affects the bond market. Bonds are financial instruments that corporations and governments use to borrow money. They borrow money if they're running a deficit, if they need to pay accounts right now and don't have the cash in hand. Bonds have three important properties. Bonds have maturity date, interest rate, and face value. Let's say that I want to borrow $100. So I can issue a bond worth $100 of face value, let's say interest rate of 5% and maturity date of 100 years from now. What that means is that I'll borrow $100 and I'll pay you back, give you back 5% of that amount every year. So 5% of $100 is $5 every year. And whenever we get to the end of the maturity date, 100 years from now, I'll give you back that amount. Corporations and governments do the same thing. They issue bonds and they get money, they give you back every year the interest rate, and then by the end of the maturity date, they give you back all the money. So there is an interesting thing going on right now in the world. Bonds have negative interest rate. That means that a government will borrow money or a corporation will borrow money and get money from you every year and give you back the face value, the money that you borrow, by the end date. But that doesn't make any sense. Why would you borrow money to someone, a corporation or government, and at the end of it you get back the same amount of money and every year you give more money to the government or corporation? So governments around the world, like the Bank of Japan or the ECB, the European Central Bank, they print out money and they buy these bonds. The Bank of Japan is issuing money and buying from that money the bonds that the same government is issuing. That creates a distortion in the whole bond market. The bond market is a huge market, and what ends up happening is that the price of bonds ends up going higher and higher because there is someone that can buy bonds at any price because they can just print money. And because the market is distorted, we can actually see the bond prices in different markets being distorted. So, for example, if we look at the Austrian bond market, if you look at the price of bonds for the Austrian government, they've been increasing a lot, as you can see in this graph. That happens for all bonds and across different markets. And that distortion actually distorts the market in different areas. One example is private banks are actually being hurt by this policy. So for example, banks in Europe are being hurt because of that. You can actually look at Credit Suisse, for example, their stock has been going down. And the reason for that is that the interest rate of bonds has been going down and down. They went negative in Europe. And if banks can't charge money to lend money to people, they start not making any money. We can see that in, as an example, Credit Suisse. And that's not only affecting the bond market. We have around $17 trillion of negative yield bonds, but also the stock market is getting completely distorted. And the reason for that is that corporations like Apple or Microsoft are issuing bonds at 0% interest rate or even negative interest rate, so they can borrow money for very, very cheap and they buy back their stocks. And that pushes up the price of stocks everywhere. That's not only happening for Apple or Microsoft, it's happening across the board. And that creates something that's called the Cantillon effect. We'll talk about that in another video. If you like this video, subscribe or click on the notifications button. Have a good day, guys.